You left our life in a rental, and you expected me to treat it like a hobby. That's what I shouted across the commuter lot. My voice cut through lunch chatter, right between the hiss of a vent and the smell of someone's reheated tuna. People stopped. Coffee cups froze mid-air. It felt like the first honest thing I had said in 3 years. I am Alex, male, 38 years old. My wife, Maya, female, 36 years old, and I had been together for 11 years, married for 8. We had 2 kids, a daughter who was 8 years old and a toddler boy who had just turned 2. On paper, we were the checklist people post pictures about. Perfect Halloween costumes, soccer games, PTA bake sales. Behind the filters, though, was a slow leak I only noticed when my phone started being boring and hers suddenly lit up like a Christmas tree. You'll want to know what happened after I threw her work bag onto the pavement and watched her face go white. You'll want to know if judges sided with me, if HR fired her, if the kids stopped asking why Daddy's name was missing from family pictures. I will tell you everything, and by the end, you will decide. Did I cross a line, or did I finally draw one? It began with a text notification when she thought I was asleep. Can't wait to see you tonight. Read the preview from a contact saved only as Sam, Studio. My thumb hovered because I promised myself I would never be that person who rifled through someone else's life. But later that night, when the house hummed and the baby monitor hissed, curiosity became a sledgehammer. I opened her phone. There were hotel receipts, late-night selfies, pet names I had never heard, and promises to be hers at 2 a.m. The worst were the dates. Anniversary mentions timed with business trips when I was nursing a newborn and she was supposed to be at home. The next morning, I did what every betrayed person thinks about. I confronted her. She smiled like a practiced actress and said, "We were just fooling around. It never meant anything." I read the messages aloud until the elevator silence in our hallway felt like a courtroom. She admitted it had been going on for 3 years, through pregnancy, through late-night feedings, through my quiet fight with depression. The smell of her perfume, something floral and expensive, made me feel dizzy. I felt like I was unraveling in the smallest ways. The ring warm against my thumb. The cereal box still half full. The unread notes on the fridge. I stalked her the way broken people do. Not because I wanted to be a detective, but because I needed proof the texts hadn't been a mistake. One Thursday, she said she was heading to a late rehearsal. I followed in a beat-up sedan, the radio playing a song I hated to keep me awake. She went into a small art studio downtown hand in hand with Sam. They bought coffee, laughed too loudly, kissed like they had a whole life to spend. My hands were cold on the steering wheel. I tasted pennies. Later, I found they had a spare key to a downtown one-bedroom. Our escape, according to a string of breadcrumbs in her messages. I am not proud of what I plan next. The idea slotted together like the neat pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. If she wanted 2 lives, I would show her one of them didn't have a place at our table. I packed her things, work blazers, sneakers, the ridiculous collection of enamel pins she loved, into black contractor bags. I drove to her workplace, parked under a maple tree, and waited. When they walked out together, arms linked, I emptied the bags on the pavement. Her heels clacked. A scarf fluttered into a puddle. People filmed with phones. She stared at me like I was an unscripted intrusion in her curated story. A coworker, an HR manager I had met at a holiday party once, grabbed me by the elbow and hissed, "Do it quietly." Someone else muttered, "This is insane." My neighbor's car alarm began to chirp. Laughter and gasps mixed with the sharp smell of diesel. I said, loud enough for people to hear, "You are not coming home." Maya's face, normally composed and glossy in group photos, crumpled. Sam ducked behind a sedan. For the first time in months, I could breathe. Is being direct always better than being polite? Morgan, my oldest friend, would later ask me, and I will confess, at that moment, directness felt like oxygen. The immediate aftermath was a circus. Someone uploaded a shaky video to social media. It had a filter that made my hair look silver. The office rumor mill spun faster than any conversation I had ever had at a PTA meeting. Maya's phone rang off the hook. Her mother called me loud enough for the whole street to hear, asking if I had lost my mind. My dad texted a fuming paragraph about not making family matters public. Inside the house, the baby monitor kept making static noises like tiny thunder, and my daughter's stuffed rabbit smelt like lavender and toothpaste. People pick sides. My best friend Morgan, female, 39 years old, sent me a GIF and a text that said, "Iconic," with a string of crying laughing emojis. My sister Jamie called and asked if I had thought about custody. "Think rationally," she said, voice steady, the way people try to throw a rope to someone between cliffs. Don't let emotion blow up your financial life. A neighbor left 2 lasagna containers on my porch. "Thinking of you," the note read. Small things became loud gestures of support or condemnation. HR at Maya's company called asking if I would file a statement. Turns out Sam reported to her. That kind of reporting line can make a company very nervous. Quid pro quo, favoritism, hostile work environment. A woman in a navy blazer from HR said, "We can't comment on personnel matters, but we'll look into company policy." The smell of copier toner and cheap office coffee haunted my dreams that night. On the phone, Maya alternated between pleading and rage. "You ruined everything," she said. "How could you be so cruel?" I could hear the clank of dishes, the soundtrack of a life I was told I had destroyed. "You were cruel first," I wanted to say. Her hands had been in someone else's photos of vacations. Her voice on voicemail messages meant for another life. "Do you think I embarrassed them too much?" I asked Morgan later, as we sat on my sofa and ate cold lasagna out of foil. She shrugged and said, "They made their bed at work. You just showed people who had been sleeping in it." But then practicality smacked me awake. A friend who works in law, Tom, male, 40, said quietly, "You need a strategy. If she loses her job, that affects support. If she can claim you publicly shamed her, that's something opposing counsel will use." He tapped a napkin with a list: custody, assets, bank accounts, evidence. The house smelled like burnt toast as reality crept in. Revenge felt righteous. Chess required planning. My daughter asked that evening with a small, uncertain voice, "Will Daddy still come to my play?" I put her on my lap and smelled the hair product she hated me buying. I wanted to promise. I wanted to fix things with a bandage. I did not know how. "Would you invite a betrayer back into your life?" my mind whispered later, a question I borrowed from the chorus of comments I had read that night. The silence of the house answered. I did not know. The weeks after were a grind of tattletales and paperwork. Maya moved into their little studio full-time. She said it was independence. I called it avoidance. She posted cryptic lines on social media about finding myself, and coworkers texted me variations of sympathy and judgment. Sam quit. Some people at her office whispered that I had overstepped, that there were kinder ways. Others DM'd me with screenshots they'd kept, evidence they said I deserved. The smell of printer ink and stale donuts became the backdrop to my inbox. I lawyered up. My attorney, Denise, female, 46, was blunt. "You did make a scene. That will be in the record. But you also have undeniable proof of misconduct while on company time and evidence of funds missing, if you can find them." She chewed on a pen cap and slid a folder across the table, smelling faintly of peppermint gum. "First step, secure accounts. Second step, get DNA tests for the kid if you're worried. Third step, preserve communications." The DNA suggestion rattled me like a loose tooth. The idea clouded everything. Could I be raising a child who was not mine? The thought turned my breakfast into sawdust. I remembered the nights I had changed diapers, the tiny leg that kicked my shin, the way our son reached for my face and laughed. But doubt is a cunning parasite. I got the test scheduled that week, the clinic smelling of antiseptic and lemon-scented wipes. Friends argued strategy like armchair generals. Secure assets, contain the threat, one friend texted with movie quote zeal. Nuke it from orbit, it's the only way to be sure. The movie line made me laugh in the parking lot, like a man who is suddenly aware of his own cartoonish rage. At home, my daughter started drawing family pictures with Daddy and Mommy, but sometimes with a tiny house labeled Maya's Place. She asked me once, halfway through Macaroni and Cheese, did Mommy leave because she didn't like bedtime stories? I felt like a fraud and a hero at once. The toddler clapped, oblivious, and the old kettle began to whistle on the stove, a small domestic trumpet for a life being rearranged. Maya called one night, voice thick. "Can we try counseling?" she asked. "I made mistakes." There was a smell of the city in the background, fries, wet pavement, someone smoking. "You humiliated me," she said. "You could have discussed this, not thrown my things out." I wanted to say, "You humiliated us by lying." The contradiction sat between us like a third person at the table.
Do you think people cheat because they're unhappy or selfish? I asked Denise later. She gave me a look like I had handed her a burning coal and asked what to do with it. Both, she said, often both. Midpoint, the twist that rearranged the chessboard. Just when I thought the case would be a gare of petty social media and custody filings, my bank statement lit up like a crime scene. I had been doing the auto pay for our joint accounts. We always did. And I noticed withdrawals layered like fingerprints. Transfers to an LLC name I did not recognize. Payments to an address in the arts district. Charges labeled studio lease. My stomach dropped. The savings we had been funneling toward the kids' fund, toward a future college nest egg, had thinned. At first, I thought it was a bookkeeping error. Then I followed the digital trail. Maya had been tapping into joint savings and transferring money to their apartment and Sam's freelance studio expenses. There were tiny recurring transfers, carefully disguised as household supplies. The smell of printer toner in the law office now tasted metallic. I felt stupid and furious in equal measure. I walked into Maya's office that afternoon carrying a stack of bank statements like a judge carrying a gavel. The receptionist's perfume was sharp and sweet, citrus and something floral. I asked, "Can I speak to HR?" The HR woman, Maria, female 32, recognized me, then paled. I placed the statements on her desk. "Your manager has been misdirecting funds," I said, my voice steady, but the room spinning like an old-school record. HR opened an investigation. Suddenly, it was not just marital betrayal, it was company liability. If Maya had been approving studio expenses for personal benefit, the company had a problem. If Sam had been a direct report, the conflict of interest was a legal bedrock. Within 48 hours, HR called Maya into a meeting. My phone buzzed. I was in the kitchen, the smell of coffee from a single-cup brewer mingling with fear, when I heard footsteps, Maya's shoes on pavement, then a hollow silence. 2 hours later, she walked out carrying a cardboard box. The look on her face was numb, not the fire I had expected, but a hollowed-out version of someone who had already replayed the scene 1,000 times in her head. Sam left 2 weeks later, reportedly to pursue creative opportunities. The office grapevine had been pruning reputations mercilessly. Some people called it poetic justice. Others called it vindictive. My father called it childish and warned me that courts favored stability, rooms with fewer theatrics. Denise said quietly, "You exposed the pattern. You also handed opposing counsel the narrative of someone who reacts publicly. We will need to frame it. When Maya's boss called to say she was being placed on administrative leave pending inquiry, I felt a small, sick relief. Then the math arrived like a cold invoice. If Maya was fired, her ability to pay support could be affected. People texted me, "Think about the kids. If she is unemployed, you may pay more." The pragmatic voice that had been sleeping in the corner all along was suddenly awake. That night, my daughter drew a family portrait with 4 stick figures: Mom, Dad, Brother, and a small square labeled "The Studio." She handed it to me and whispered, "I did not know where to put Daddy." The sting was immediate and precise. I realized vengeance had consequences I had not fully counted. The courtroom drama began like something we saw on television: stern faces, plastic cups of cheap coffee, and paperwork like little bureaucratic flags. Our divorce filings smelled of toner and legal ink. Denise sat across from me in a conference room that smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and determination. "They will paint you as the angry, vengeful spouse," she said. "Be factual, be calm, let us do the theatrics." Maya's lawyer painted a different picture: a husband who timed his tantrum for maximum humiliation, who threatened her career when he should have protected the family. Her family put up pictures on social media of birthdays she had hosted, of his volunteer hours, all impeccably curated to show stability. Meanwhile, I had emails from colleagues who confessed they had suspected favoritism for months and screenshots of transfers for studio supplies. The judge asked for a custody evaluation. A social worker, kind, soft-voiced, carrying a thermos that smelled like weak tea, came to our home. She watched our daughter play with blocks, noted how the toddler crawled toward me, and how I read the same bedtime story every night, even when my eyes stung. The little rituals mattered. The social worker's report, smelling of stationery and soap, said both parents were loving, but flagged the instability surrounding the public confrontation. As paperwork accumulated, I found myself in small, private crises.
I walked the dog and felt the weight of what I had done. Had I cut off an arm to save the body? I had no answer. I kept thinking about a comment someone left on a forum I had scoured at 2 in the morning. Revenge makes you feel like justice, but it doesn't raise kids. The line lodged under my ribs like a splinter. Morgan called one night after a whisper of how the judge might lean. "So, are you proud?" she asked. I thought of the parking lot, the sound of my daughter's laugh, the smell of her hair when she fell asleep on my shoulder. "I am complicated," I said. When Maya missed a scheduled weekend visit because she forgot, actually because she was at a weekend show with Sam, my daughter sat by the window with her backpack still on. The house smelled of cold milk and crayons. She asked me, "Did Daddy forget me?" My throat closed. "No," I said. "He is busy." The lie was small and ugly. The custody evaluator asked me, "Would you forgive a partner who lied for years?" I looked at the evaluator's notepad, smelled the room's lemon air freshener, and answered honestly, "I do not know." The legal process peeled back layers I had not anticipated. Depositions dredged up small cruelties and the big betrayals. Friends testified to my character. Coworkers provided private messages and timestamps. Maya's parents called me cruel on a voicemail that sounded like a sermon, and I let it play out because the answer was not something I could deliver in a soundbite. The house felt too big and too quiet. Even the thermostat seemed to judge me. Then a late-night twist. A forensic accountant working with Denise found that some of the studio charges were not just for rent, but for a contractor billing, for home renovations at Sam's house. Money had been moving like a hidden river, and when Denise traced it, the current led to a small business account that had Maya's email attached. The smell of burnt coffee in my lawyer's office was steady as she explained how this could be leveraged. We presented the findings to the court as part of the property settlement discussion.
The judge listened to the evidence, the clicks of a clock keeping time like a metronome. Maya's attorney argued the charges were legitimate professional expenses. Denise countered with invoices and calendar entries that showed studio sessions timed during our anniversaries and on nights I thought she was home making dinner. My mouth tasted like metal. When the judge asked Maya why she had not disclosed the studio as a marital expense sooner, she said, voice soft, "I did not want to admit I was unhappy." The admission landed like a dropped cup. I thought of every night I had asked if she was okay and been brushed off. I thought of the times I had sat on the couch pretending to sleep while she left. The court's gears moved slowly, but I felt a small vindication swell in my chest. Still, victory felt thin. I had achieved consequences. Rehired accountants, a frozen joint account for a while, and a court-mandated repayment plan. What I did not have was a family stitched back together. The toddler still reached for me at night, and the daughter still put daddy in pictures sometimes, and other times not. The house smelled of old rain and possibility. Should I have spoken privately instead of publicly? I asked Denise once, a question I had sat with like a bruise. She did not answer for me. As the divorce settled into a slow, grinding finale, people on both sides rearranged their lives. Maya moved to a smaller place. Sam's freelance gigs dried up after allegations spread. Some of our mutual friends unfriended me and chose silence over complexity. My father stopped returning calls for a while. Morgan and Jamie remained my constants, maps in a fog. There were small moments of grace. My daughter crawled into my lap during a thunderstorm and said, "I like when you hum." I realized then that children pick up pieces of us we do not know how to fit back together. Therapy, both family and individual, became a regular smell in our home. Candle wax and mint gum, tissues. We read books out loud. The toddler built towers and knocked them over. The crash became a little lesson in rebuilding. People online still debated me. Some called me monstrous. Others sent messages, "You did what you had to." The gray area is suffocating because it holds both truths. I had humiliated her in public. She had humiliated our marriage for years. Both were real. I still wrestle with a single sharp sentence that keeps returning. Do you think revenge makes you the bad guy? Sometimes I wake up and the answer is yes. Other times I think, he or she who breaks a vow first breaks the moral ledger. I do not know a simple morality for this mess. Mini resolution. The judge awarded joint custody with primary physical custody to me for the toddler and shared time for our daughter, pending follow-ups. Maya was ordered to repay a portion of misappropriated funds. Sam moved away. The house sold. We found a smaller place with a yard that smelled like cut grass and possibility. But here is the final thing that still hits me like a hot gust. Watching my daughter at school draw our family one afternoon. She drew 4 stick figures, mom, dad, brother, and a little square labeled studio. She hesitated, then left a blank space where a father might go sometimes. She looked at me with the concentrated, clear-eyed honesty children have and said, "I did not know where to draw daddy today." My chest broke in a way that was both terrible and necessary. And that is when I realized not everything. Revenge gives back what it takes away. Sometimes it clears the smoke so you can see the ruins and start to build. Sometimes it leaves you with the work of rebuilding. Would you have handled it differently? Should I have kept the scene private? Would you ever invite a betrayer back into your life? These questions sit with me like old bills. Answered, unpaid, complicated. And one final line before the paperwork is closed and the cleanup begins. I burned the bridge because it was the only way I could stop falling through it.